One of the best parts of being a professor here is that I not only get to teach students, I also get to learn from my incredible colleagues. And this next colleague is one whose lectures I go to still every time I can. And everyone has something to learn from MacArthur Fellow and Distinguished Professor in our Department of World Arts and Cultures, Professor Peter Sellars. Peter understands the art of theater. He's helped our community explore and illuminate the most pressing issues of our time: race, war, poverty, and the international refugee crisis. His work has been called groundbreaking and transformative. In fact, when I was in grad school, I had a professor, a costume design professor, Dunya Ramakova, who works frequently with Peter on productions as his designer. And I remember we were looking together at some images and video from a production of Peter's. And I said, Dunya, what's happening there? This is so extraordinary. It was this truly creative, incredible moment. I said, what does that mean? What does it mean in that moment? What's he getting at? She said, actually, Brian, I asked Peter the same question when we were working on the project. And Peter said, Dunya, it's just razzmatazz. Wait, what? Sometimes it's just razzmatazz. But there's so much more to Peter's work. Peter never forgets that theater is also joy. And that even razzmatazz, a lesson I still remember now and every time I'm directing a production, has a role to play. And in Peter's work, surprise and substance are never far apart. Please help me welcome Distinguished Professor Peter Sellars.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here with this amazing group of people. And what a pleasure to be at UCLA. I've been here for 40 years now, and I first came when I was much younger and running the Los Angeles Festival, which was the continuation of the Olympic Arts Festival. And it was saying, okay, what can we do with the arts in a moment in history where there is a lot to say, and it needs to be said a lot better. One of the first tasks was to move the arts out of art centers, because nobody needs an art center because that separates the arts from the world. And in fact, art is the only place that you can actually create a zone of permanent justice. It's the only place you can create a zone of permanent healing. It's the place you create a zone where nobody wins and nobody loses. Because every time you set up another situation where somebody won and somebody lost, you've set up the conditions for the next war. How do we create an ecosystem where everybody benefits and everybody invests in the community and in each other humanly? Where the profit is extraordinary human beings. Every human being is a miracle. How clueless are we about that? How utterly clueless. At some point, you have to say, this human being is a jewel, is precious, is not for sale, is priceless. I say to my students, please look at that part of your life that is not for sale. Please ask yourself what you do that nobody pays you to do. You do it because that's who you are. That's what you're on this earth to do. You're here to do something your parents could not do, their parents could not do, and their parents could not do. And that's why we value our students here, because thank God they are young. And I just plead with these students to stay young and to be young right now. And I plead with the adults to try being a little younger also. Because students are not wrong. They're feeling something and they're here to move the world forward. And that's what makes teaching the greatest honor of your life and the hardest thing in your life. Teaching a class is much harder than directing a film. Because the students here are asking you really deeply the questions no one else will ever ask. And they're insisting that the answers be real. And for me, this generation's thirst for justice, this generation's need not to compromise because they've lived in a world where the lies are winning and where our lie is valued as truth and where truth is devalued openly. And of course, in this world, you can usually tell which things are lies because people have to scream them and insist on them with incredible violence. And truth usually speaks much more quietly. We all know in our own families when certain types of speech or actions are forbidden and are not allowed. It does not create peace. It creates a nightmare for everyone. What cannot be spoken is internalized as rage, as hurt, and you never know when it's going to come out and the way it's going to come out. And in fact, it is the source of violence. The arts exist as a way to open channels of communication that have been closed. And every time a channel of communication is closed, is shut down, violence follows. Human beings have to talk about everything. We have so much to talk about, and we have to really get good at talking about it. And nobody can do this alone. We need to do it together, and we need to do it with wide ranges of groups of people, very different people together, in very courageous and honest exchange. I am very privileged to teach at a program at UCLA called World Arts and Cultures. That is, everything is plural. There's no singular anything. Get used to plural everything. When any human being walks in the room, a world just walked into the room. In fact, many worlds. Don't think you know who somebody is because you think how they're dressed or what their political association is, because every human being is so many other things. Beautiful Lebanese author Amin Maalouf has a book called Murderous Identities. As long as you think somebody's identity is just Palestinian or just Jewish, you can kill them. But that doesn't include any of our grandmothers, who are so many things. Humans are so many things. None of us are one thing. That depth of real deep identity. I ask my students to write down how many communities they're part of and stop at 100. How many things you care about, what kind of music you love, just go down. A human being is so rich. Nobody reduces, and no one ever will reduce. And anyone who's spotting my grandmother from some satellite surveillance and directing a bomb towards them does not know my grandmother for 1 second. And obviously, we're living in a world where context is in the context of no context. So your freedom fighter is my terrorist. And we're both looking at the same gesture, and we don't know how to read it. So this question of context, this question of beginning to spend time with people who are not like us and we don't like, but in fact, we live in this world together, and we're all responsible together. And if there's going to be change, if there's going to be progress, if there's going to be movement, it has to happen together. That's with the people you like and with the people you don't like. So can we get over the fact that growing up thinking of all the things you like and the people you like is just a total waste of time? Because the world was not created based on who you like and who you don't like. Everybody's here. So how do we live together? How do we move together? The arts are to use poetry to detox language. Open language up, get out of these nightmare, tight, violent statements, and move into poetry. Let spirituality shine through words. Let deep emotion, passion, and compassion find form and eloquence in music. And yes, in dance, let's move together. Let's create architecture to have spaces that are public and private, that have equilibrium and openness, open-mindedness in the design. What I'm trying to say is, anybody who thinks the arts are expensive, let's say the world minus the arts is so much more expensive. We are condemned to pointless, clueless, ignorant violence. And that ignorance is very expensive. And that culture of lies, I'm sorry, but no lie will ever be true. No matter how many times you say it, and the truth is going to wait, because it knows it's true. One of the things we're looking for from artists is artists have a chance to, nobody has to vote for them, they don't have to win a popularity contest, they don't have to be successful. In fact, most of the artists we most admire died thinking they were failures because they had the courage to say something that no one else would say and stand by it. And we read those words 400 years later and are so moved and are reminded of our own centers. But those people died official failures. And for me, that narrative of failure is so much more attractive than many other narratives of success. And what the arts are inviting us to do is just look, as my colleagues have said, look at the invisible. Look at the invisible, listen to what people can't say. Can you hear that? And then how can you create the conditions where they can finally speak? That's our life work. And not just speak, but be, exfoliate, become who they are, because we're told by globalization that we're all the same, we're just not equal. But in fact, the reality is we are all equal and we are not the same. And equality is based on the fact that nobody is replaceable. Every human being is irreplaceable and does not duplicate any other human being. And that is the power of being alive right now, and the power of convening and creating gatherings. A lot of my life was to create these large festivals. The Los Angeles Festival in 1993 was programmed by 350 people, was entirely devoted to Arab, Jewish, and Black art and artists and communities in the Gulf War and 1 year after the LA uprising. And so the Palestinian Dance Company was at Wilshire Boulevard Temple. The Armenian Orthodox Church had Chicano punk band, and the Arab blowout Arab music festival was at Second Baptist Church on Central Avenue. And yes, people met each other for the first time. People heard each other for the first time. People actually learned who each other were for the first time and were in each other's Rolodexes, because the city is astonishing. Everybody is here. But people need the invitation. Very important for me is that possibility of speaking about the things that are illegal. That's what we do in the arts. We go right into areas of pain, of anger, of misunderstanding, and of historical harm. And that place has to be detoxed because it's sitting there. We're all carrying it with us. We now know, of course, that our mother's traumas and our grandmother's traumas are in every cell of our bodies. We're all carrying this stuff. We've got to process it. So one of the reasons why beauty exists is to put down your weapons and just realize the beauty of life, the depth of the beauty of life, the fragility and just infinite, infinite joy that's waiting in every human being. Everyone. May I just say that what's great is what's coming is better than what was before. You know, that nostalgia thing that the past is great and we want to bring back the past, that is the original fascist trope, and it was never good. Okay, so let's just actually work on the things that were never good ever in human history, anywhere. That's the work ahead of us. I'm just going to read a poem from 1947 by a great Iraqi poet. Revolt against the sun. She stood before the sun, screaming out loud, "Oh sun, my rebel's heart is just like you. While young, it washed away much of my life. Its lights quenched the stars' thirst, ever renewed. Careful, don't let the sadness in my eyes or these copious tears deceive your sight. This sadness is the form of my revolt, to which the gods bear witness every night." There's a generation of young people all over the world growing up with authoritarian regimes who cannot speak and are not seeing their dreams. Youth suicide rates at this moment are just shocking. And when a generation of young people is saying something's wrong, we have to listen, hand them the microphone, because each generation is here to make more justice in the world. And we need to welcome them and support them with everything we have. Which is why it's a pleasure to teach at UCLA in a context that is so alive and diverse and challenging, and that is not shy and is not in fear of the most difficult issues on earth. That's why we're here. And of course, now for our students, we can say, well, you have no budget to work with. the money's gone. Of course, Euripides would say, you know, anybody who mistakes money for freedom is making a big mistake, because money doesn't bring freedom. He said this, of course, as oligarchs destroyed the original Greek democracy. Don't confuse money with freedom, ever. And of course, in the arts, what we do is we create something from nothing. Every day. And that nothing is not nothing. It's all the things you ever thought and felt and no one ever noticed. And that's huge. It's immense. And it's powerful. So our invitation now is for our students to work with what the Buddhists call the 4 immeasurables, which will never run out. Compassion, generosity, courage, and love. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I don't have a